Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again. This is Dr. Tom Neal, and this is another edition of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, an opportunity for me to engage in conversations with people about matters of faith, especially as it relates to life in the world and witnessing to the person of Christ. And today I'm very blessed and honored that Professor Andreas Widmer has agreed to join me today for a conversation about a topic that I find incredibly beautiful and deep and profound in our faith, which is a theology of work. Professor Widmer, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Well, Professor Widmer is joining us from his home office in Washington, D.C. He teaches at the Catholic University of America. I'll just do a little tiny biographical introduction. I'll leave out a number of things, but just to give you viewers a sense of who you are. So Andreas Widmer is an associate professor of practice and entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America's Bush School of Business, where he's been shaping minds since the fall of 2012. He also serves as the director of the Art and Carlis Sioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship. Andreas co-founded the Seven Fund, a philanthropic organization that promotes enterprise solutions to poverty. His extensive experience as a business executive spans high-tech, international business strategy, consulting, and economic development. He has held leadership roles at the OTF Group, ePrize Corporation, Dragon Systems, and FTP Software. His work has taken him across the globe from the United States to Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, leading teams to bring over 100 leading-edge technology products to the market. And as an author, Andreas has explored the intersection of leadership, entrepreneurship, and spirituality. His book, The Pope and the CEO, Pope St. John Paul II's Lessons to a Young Swiss Guard, draws from his experiences serving as a Swiss Guard for Pope John Paul II and his subsequent career in business. And his latest book is The Art of Principled Entrepreneurship, Creating Enduring Value, released in April of 2022. So that's a bit of Professor Widmer's background. There's quite a bit more. But today I would like to do at the beginning here, if you wouldn't mind, is I'd like to begin our conversation by quoting from another author who speaks on this topic, Michael Novak. I'm sure you were very familiar with his work, particularly his work, a book called Business as a Calling. Have you read that book?
More than once.
I would imagine.
I'd love to get into it, but I'm going to love the quote, no matter where it's at in the book, because I love it.
Where I get it from. So I'm going to read a quote. It's my favorite quote from the book. I used to use his book in my class that I taught seminarians on the lay vocation, and I also had them read your book, on The Pope and the CEO. And by the way, Professor Widmer kindly in 2022 joined my class by Zoom with the seminarians and led a class discussion on his book. But here's the quote, Professor Widmer. And I'd like you just to comment on it or respond to it to kind of open up our conversation today. So Michael Novak says this: what was the vocation that from all eternity the Lord God Creator chose for his only Son, born of humankind? The Lord God Creator called the Christ, the Redeemer, to shoulder the vocation of small business. A creative vocation, a vocation of humble service to nearly every human household. As a carpenter, Jesus found freedom to be creative and to serve others. Creativity, exactitude, quality, beauty, service to others, independence. This was the substance of his daily life, in preparation for all that was to come. And like Jesus, each of us must earn our way by the sweat of our brow amid disappointment and sorrow. So I love that quote. It sets in context the magnificence of business as a calling. So any thoughts to begin with?
It's beautiful. What I wish he would say on top, but he says it later on in the book, is, of course, the reference at the end. He sort of talks about the vocation of business, and Jesus was, in a sense, a family business owner not in a sense, he was a family business owner, second generation, probably third, and worked every day, creativity and all that, but then also the toil of work, where not everything goes the way you want it, and there's the obstacle of our will and maybe customer will as well. And so he brings the two things together that, it comes from the Bible. The toil of work is punishment for the sin, but work itself is punishment for the original sin is the toil. But work itself predates the original sin, and that's the creativity part of it. And so that even Jesus, who's sinless, who never sinned, still had to toil in a way at business, just like all of us do. And I think that's a very beautiful image. How many people identify with Jesus as a small business owner,
Yes. And even to think of the vast majority of his life was spent in that and not doing his public ministry, which is only the last 3 years. And so how sanctifying that is.
It is. And I think that's one of the things that Michael Novak did. This is actually what you just read. That was the first book of Michael's that I read. And at the time, it must have been in the late 1990s or so. At the time, I didn't really know him. And I read that book, and I felt when I read it, because of my own experience as a helping to start and grow businesses and leading businesses, I felt that he verbalized a lot of things that I always felt, but I didn't have the vocabulary or the insight to actually vocalize it. And so in that sense, he wrote out of my heart in a way. And it was only later that I actually was introduced to him, and we hit it off right away. Became fast friends. He moved to, I met him right after his wife passed away. And that was a very difficult time for Michael. I want to say he almost died of grief. And then his brother, then his brother and sisters intervened. And basically his brother said, look, come with me. Let's move to Florida, to Ave Maria, to this Catholic community, and retire there. And Michael did. And they bought a house together, Ben, his brother, and him. And they lived down there. And I would go visit them here and there until he had this idea. There was also another couple from Massachusetts, Michael and Catherine Pakalik, who I knew back in Boston in earlier years, who also moved to Ave Maria. So in the wintertime, as people like to do from Massachusetts, in the wintertime, they go visit Florida. And so I would go and visit them. And one day Michael had this idea to say, we need to make sure that we start a business school here, not just a university. And so I thought that was brilliant. And the four of us came up with a plan to propose to Ave Maria to build a business school. And I was just, as they say, between two gigs and didn't know what my next thing was going to be. And so he convinced me and said, listen, you need to come here, come a month and sell this to the community here and to the president and everybody. And lo and behold, it did not work. We had the plan, and we tried to sell this idea to start a Catholic business school, authentically Catholic business school to Ave Maria. They wouldn't have it. And so I said, well, that's God's will. We gave it a good effort, and they're not interested in it. So I moved back to Massachusetts, and about 3 weeks later, I got a call from an Andrew Abella, who I never met before, from the Catholic University of America, who I didn't know much about, saying, hey, we would love to start a business school, and we'd love to, we read your book, The Pope and the CEO, and it should be something along those lines. And I couldn't believe what God did. I mean, this is like so providential. And he says, we're just figuring out how to do this and everything, but and we're just in the planning phases. And I'm like, look, don't plan any further. I have a plan right here. It's all set and ready to go. And of course, I met Andrew, and he brought me to DC, and I signed up. And my first hire, I ended up taking over the entrepreneur. We built everything from scratch, but I built an entrepreneurship center, the Sioka Center, as you said. And my very first hire was Michael Novak. He was 80 years old, and he moved back to DC from Florida to help me build this thing. and so the last 3 years of his life, he spent here at Catholic University, just like he started his career at Catholic University. And he and I shared an office together. And, we both are opinionated and entrepreneurs. And so we on ideas and things, we fought like cat and dog. But I loved it. We love each other. We loved each other. I was there, I think, a couple of days before he passed away in the hospital. He was a real mentor and spiritual father, in a sense, to me. And we dedicate a lot of our work at our center to Michael Novak. So let's just say, Tom, like, I didn't tell you to read this, right? This was your idea.
That's astounding.
And so it's like Michael is in the room, right? To say, hey,
like
buddy,
Michael's in the room. That gives me chills. That is so amazing.
Yeah. So he's actually, I'm very close to him. So I love the man.
Thank you so much for that amazing story. And I read that book so many times over the years, and it had such a deep impact on me. I mean, I don't work in the world of business per se, although there are business aspects to what I do, but just the way that he showed what a Catholic character or a human character made in the image of God looks like when it is placed in service to humanity. And that book is so, and you can see himself shining through it, his aspirations, and obviously mentoring you into that as well. That's amazing. There's a comment you made on a podcast you did fairly recently where you were talking about macroeconomics, and you said, there's no such thing as macroeconomics, in terms of the meta. Everything is local, everything's micro, everything's detailed. And so when you and he would disagree over things, it wasn't over the kind of Catholic principles of human dignity and the meaning of work. It was over how that micro works. Is that right? Yeah.
I can give you a few big disagreements. And, I find as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's brought a lot of products to market, I love to argue with somebody, because it's like good friends argue because you don't let me launch a product and not tell me the truth beforehand. You know what I mean? Like, arguments among friends is actually the honesty of saying, here's what I'm thinking, and let's work this out. And in a way, iron sharpens iron, and it's a service to say, let me argue with you before you go out into public and make a fool out of yourself with the product not working. And so the kind of things I disagree with him and we fought about is I find that what we live in right now is not a proper competitive market anymore, but what I would call crony capitalism. I think we have very large companies and very large government, and they collude with each other. And I have a real distaste for that. I think that the SME, the small and medium-sized companies, the little guys, people who can only succeed through competition, are being locked out by large companies. For all the benefits that Amazon or Tesla or just large companies bring, Google and so on, and Facebook and all these people, for all the benefits they can bring, they end up, like, by definition, blocking out the other competitors, and they become so big that the little guy doesn't have a chance next to them anymore, because they get to influence the government. When Amazon goes somewhere to create a warehouse, they get tax relief, they get all the benefits, and they are not held to the same rules and regulations as we are, because they get to negotiate with the government. Well, you and I, when we start a company, we don't get to negotiate with the government. And so it's like right off the bat, you're at a disadvantage, and that hinders competition. And so I said, I'm completely against that. And I criticized it loudly, just like I did. And he basically made the argument that, as a matter of fact, large government is a fact of our reality, and that large corporations are the only. So I hope I do him justice with the argument, Michael. Okay, large governments, large companies are the only ones who can actually measure up to and hold accountable large government. So these large companies are needed in this environment to keep accountable and to be even in a way, from the business perspective, independent of government, that they can choose to go somewhere else. Where you and I, we can't choose to go somewhere else with our business. And so he felt that they play a role that is vital and that he would not want to break them up and make them smaller. And so that was over how many beers or glasses of wine did we have this argument? And I understand what he's saying. What else do we argue about? I was much more embracing of new technologies. He sometimes saw the issues of technologies. And I am, of course, a tech guy. I mean, I come out of the software industry, and I, even now with AI and everything, I always see the benefit first. And I think, to me, technology is a tool, and it's the person who uses it that does good or evil. Technology itself, I mean, a suicide machine is a bad thing, yeah, if it's designed for that. But usually it's the person who uses it who abuses a certain technology and not the technology itself. And we had arguments about that. But all in all, he's been just such a blessing to us to start our school with his vision and with his frameworks. To this day, we teach his teachings. We teach with his book. Later on, I started to read the book he did earlier, The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism. So many beautiful ideas in it. If you have not read it, if you're listening to this, check it out. The easy book to read is the vocation to business as a vocation. I think it's called. Actually, my class is called Business as a Vocation.
This is a vocation.
And so that's the easy book to read. Yeah, and then the more complex book is called The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism, which was a watershed book that you need to take some time and digest it when you read it, but it's so brilliant to understand how our economy and our society works. It has informed leaders. I know for a fact that when he told me that when he won the Templeton Prize, he gets invited to England, and then the Queen gives him the Templeton Prize, right? And when he was there, on the stage next to him was Margaret Thatcher, who asked for an invitation to this because she wanted him to sign her book, which was The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism. And he said he could see that it had notes all over and things stuck into it and everything. And it was he said it was a well-used book. And she said it was one of her favorite books that she uses. And I think, and I can say from my perspective, John Paul II was very engaged with the thought of Michael Novak and read attentively what he wrote and was very informed. The whole idea, the whole encyclical Centesimus Annus is very much informed by what Michael Novak taught. And so, he had a very strong impact, but he was one line removed from the front line, yeah?
Just incredible, but that there was all of this behind that quote that I thought of. I'm grateful you corrected that. I guess I've always said it was business as a calling for so long. I haven't even reread the front cover, Business as a Vocation. In that book, Professor Widmer, he talks quite a bit about the fact that free market economies are really ripe for promoting the work, kind of a virtuous life, if they're understood correctly and informed correctly. So when you think about, a free market economy or capitalism, I don't think you prefer the title capitalism because of its Marxist origins or just its kind of a misconstrual, I think you've said. But how do you think, so thinking about how a theology of work, how work helps us to cultivate and grow in virtue, how does a free market economy help to do that? Or what is it that makes a free market economy work towards cultivating virtuous people?
See, it's the toil part. The toil part, in a way, because we fell away. You can explain it in a sense with the original sin, that because we fell away from God, we have in a way, through our free will, discovered this the antithesis, the desire, the anti-God desire, which is sloth and latency, if you will, like to actually reject God, the true, the good, and the beautiful, in a way, the excellence, that we have now suddenly received this propensity to be more like the animals than the humans. God is excellent, in through our godliness, godlikeness, we have this potential to soar, to be beyond, not just to be an animal, to basically soar and be God-like, to continue God's creation on earth and all of that. And through the original sin and through the fall of nature, we have now fallen to the point that we tend to do nothing, tend to reject excellence, because excellence, of course, comes with this effort. And in order for us to overcome this, which would be in the beginning, I think we didn't have to overcome this. We just did this naturally. But since the original sin, we have to overcome our sloth, that when we want to become excellent, we have to toil, right? That's actually to overcome. That we're almost like we have to really work to fly, to overcome our gravity, right? And to become, to reach human excellence. And because if we wouldn't be in a competitive environment, and that's my answer to your question about why the competitive economy or the market economy, if we wouldn't compete, it's almost like in a race that you run at least as fast as the guy next to you and you have the competitiveness to win, to run faster. God needs to put us into this situation. We have to put ourselves into this situation that we constantly have to compete. Otherwise, to reach higher, to reach our excellence, reach our potential. Otherwise, we would, left on our own, we would fall short and we would stop excelling and stop pursuing excellence. And so this issue of competition, humans don't like it because it forces them to overcome sloth and like weak willedness, weak will. But it is absolutely necessary for us in order to advance as humanity, to have this competitiveness. So often then it's presented to us with different systems, I think, to say, oh no, you don't have to worry. You can just hang around and do and not compete because competition is hurtful and makes people feel bad. We can have prosperity and progress and human excellence without it. That's a lie. Because the truth is that we are fallen, and that if we don't have to compete, we will absolutely not rise to the excellence that we're made for. And the free market system is, I think, that the ideal is the only system I can think of that ensures that we pursue excellence. And maybe there is another one. The church doesn't really define it and say you have to do this one. The church is sort of saying, well, just take a system that does it. But I think the free market system is the only one that I know of that really helps us pursue, in a way, forces us to pursue human excellence.
Mm-hmm. And your whole career has been pursuing human excellence within the realm of business, particularly, and obviously teaching economics and business. And as you've talked about innumerable times in your career about your influence John Paul II has had on you, and I encourage everyone to read the book, The Pope and the CEO, that you wrote, which is a marvelous autobiographical story about your evolving relationship with him and the impact it had on your future business career and mindset and marriage and everything. What did John Paul II impart to you that gave you a different way of looking at this kind of competitive market, this free market competitive approach that is conducive to virtue? What does he show in his own example and teaching?
So the core of what John Paul has taught me, he's often say that I was not a faithful Catholic when I went into the Swiss Guards, and I found my deep faith through him, through both his guidance and his example. And it's almost like if somebody takes you by the hand and walks you up on a huge mountain and lets you see the whole surroundings. And I remember thinking of, why did nobody ever told me this? Why am I not aware of this vastness of what we can see here and the height that humanity can achieve, and and just these beautiful thoughts and vistas that you have with this faith and with this Catholic patrimony, and both faith and reason, and the depth of what he showed me there is that this is not something that you go just into a spiritual realm and you leave your body behind and then you sort of float up there. No, it's actually both of it together, that my body is actually a reflection of my godliness, and that my body is sacramental. My body has meaning both now and in eternity, right? But whatever I do now is also valid in eternity. And it's just beautiful. You can see it in Jesus's, just now we're in this season where you read all these things where Jesus says, what you bind on earth is bound in heaven. And he tells the apostles, he tells us that what we do here counts in eternity, in the good and in the bad. And what he showed me is this sacramentality, in a way, of all of me, not just my mind or my spirit, but my body and everything. And that changed how I saw the world. And it's like taking scales away from my eyes. That has shown me that I have this opportunity as a person, let's say as a business person, as I go in, to imitate God and to be, it's almost like, he would just explain to us that we are like God in that we get to continue creation.
Yes.
And you get to continue creation by being a subject rather than an object. So he would explain that the animals are objects because they have no mind of their own. The animal has no choice, meaning it doesn't have free will. It has to do whatever it's programmed, in a sense, to do, what its nature tells it. God is the being that can do what it wants to do. God can do what he wants to do. He's not really limited by anything. We're like God because we get to actually go against our nature. If I don't want to eat, I'm not going to eat. Right? And I can say, I feel like doing this right now, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something else. No animal has this power. This is part of our godliness. And therefore, when you listen to this and you feel that your body is demanding something, know that you have the freedom, which is part of your godliness, to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. That's part of it. And so, so we're called in, and we also are the only animal that can say, let me think of something and make it a reality. It's like God creating the world. Like I can think, I was part of the company that invented speech recognition. So we basically have a team that thinks, wouldn't it be cool to create a software that can transcribe human speech? Boom. There it is. I have it now on my iPhone with Siri, and it's its own little thing. And I'm not in it. You know what I mean? It's not a part of me, but a part of me is with it, right? Because it's the product we created, and I helped in. I'm not an engineer, but I helped in bringing it to market and all that. And that is very much like God created the earth and then turned to us and said, now I'm going to make you. I make you in my image, and I'll allow you to go into this world and, in a sense, play me or participate in my creativity. And so now I get to create goods and create services in a way to continue this creation. But I have now the ability, and this goes back to John Paul's insight, or at least how he explained it to me. Now I have the choice to create goods that are truly good, right? And to create or provide services that truly serve or not. And I get to decide. See, this is in a way where we then can fall. It's not just Adam and Eve that fell. You and I can fall. Anybody listening to this can fall again, over and over, with their physicality by creating goods that are not good, not truly good, or providing services that don't truly serve. And this becomes a very personal thing, of course, because what is truly good and what does truly serve? And this is a part of your godliness in the business world, that you get to make that decision in a sense, except that at the end of your life, you're going to have to talk to the big guy to say, here's my measure of what I say is truly good and what truly serves. And then you basically stand for that, right? You bring that back to the Lord and say, here's what I did. And that is a merciful Lord and everything, but there's a lot of consequences to this. And my point there, which is John Paul's point, is that you will bring that physicality that you did into eternity, right? And that's both beautiful and frightening. But it is it is a completely different way to look at our being Christian, at our being an incarnate spirit. That it's not, our view of heaven isn't that one day my soul is going to be free and fly away and be like an angel. No, actually, heaven and the New Jerusalem is going to be the second coming of the resurrection, and we say it in the Creed, of the body of the dead, the resurrection of with the body and the soul, right, back together. And he called that the theology of the body, right? And that's I've had the privilege to listen to him for 2 years on this. That it inspired me. I mean, I keep learning and going forward with it, but that is really what I'm bringing to this teaching here at Catholic University, is the teaching business in light of the theology of the body. And I think that is where Michael Novak and I really were one in putting this program together, in that we felt that is where it's at. That's the perspective. And that's a uniquely Catholic perspective that I think is our best kept secret.
It really is our best kept secret. And what's listening to you here now, the secret of theology of the body, because theology of the body, I think if you ask Catholics who are engaged in that language and that world and the thought world of John Paul II, there would think largely sexuality when you say theology of the body. But what I love here is that you see that John Paul II's thinking about the body is far larger than that, far broader than that. His social teaching was deeply formed by his theology of the body, and particularly in this case, his theology of work, of toil, and then therefore of business.
And, you could compare, I think, of course, the most important human relationship we have is marriage. That's molded after the Trinity, and it's a God, it's like the highest form of relationship we have. But other relationships and other parts of our personal life fit into that in a sort of a lower level, but nonetheless a critical level of our path to holiness. And I would like to point out that the first objective and privilege of marriage is to be able to create an eternal being, and so when we have a child, this isn't some angel that now gets caught and stuffed into a little baby, and this angel was there before. No, this is a completely new being, but it is a being that has been created through the love of a husband and a wife, and that being will never die. That is the highest privilege that God has given us humans, to be like God, to create that. This is, John Paul would talk about how that is such a joyful and a pleasant experience to create a child like this, because God's presence, because of the ecstasy reflects God's presence, right?
Yes.
But let me ask you, where else do we create? Where else do we get this privilege of creating, not an eternal being, but where we get to continue God's creation? And that is in business and in work. And I don't say that all of that has to be paid work or the economy work or something like that. A lot of that is not in the formal economy, let's say, but all of that is what we would equate to work. Whenever we rise to the level of work, it means that we overcome our inner sloth, like where we pursue excellence, where we make an effort, right? And that is when we rise to the potential of our godliness and of our imitation of God. Right? And
Yes.
I think that's a shadow of that, because that also in its own right is an act of creativity, like, because we can make something that didn't exist before out of some new combination of whatever nature or even just thought, And so my point is that, and I think it's clear if you read the Theology of the Body, and just in how I heard him talk about it, it's clear that he meant marriage as the ultimate human to human relationship, but I think he saw business as a shadow, in a sense, you know what I mean? Like a shadow of business. Marriage is a sacrament. It's a completely different, it's different in nature, but as a shadow, us to come together and do business together and be creative together in that way, Theology of the Body all over.
That is such a magnificent, it's such a big vision, but it has such incredibly practical real world consequences. And first of all, I cannot believe that our show is almost over, by the way. I feel like we just started. This has been the most rich conversation I've had in this show. We are 7 minutes away from the end. So I guess if I had to throw everything into a final question to you to bring all of this together, thinking about business as a vocation, to use Michael Novak's book title, that idea of the calling of business with all of this kind of theological worldview you talked about, for a person who works in the business world, who's engaged in the work of business and maybe thinks of business, as you've said many times, we think of business too often as just about the products, the money, the results, and so on, but not about the actual work itself and its dignity and its deeper meaning. So with a vocational worldview of business, or of work rather, in business, how would you say, for the people listening, that could change the way they view what they do every day in their own business work life?
So work has to be good, for what you make to be, the goods that are truly good, or the services that truly serve. They have to be truly good and truly serve in two ways. They have to be truly good and truly serve to the people who receive it, but also to the people who make it. If your actual work every day isn't a happy occasion, then something's wrong. You cannot get good out of a bad process. And I'm saying happy. Look, am I happy every Monday morning to go up or get up and do this? Or am I happy if I have to, I just had to grade, 200 papers or something like that? I mean, yeah, we're talking about toil, okay? But I'm saying, if I take a step back and say, is this good? And do I want to do this? I do. And I see the good in it. And it actually, overall, it gives me joy. So I'm not saying I'm in bliss every second, but I'm saying, I see the good in this, and the path itself makes me grow. The path itself makes me focus, and I see how my excellence is increasing as I'm doing this. Not the fruit of the labor only, but the actual labor itself. I ask you to focus on this, and then you say, well, right now it's not so should I stop? If I don't feel like this, like I'm working in a kitchen or something, or I'm doing cleaning or something, or I'm taking care of some person, and I don't feel that right now, and therefore should I quit? No, you shouldn't quit. But what you should do is to reflect and go into each aspect of this and say, what is my excellence like? Like, think of your talents and of your skills and how you can grow in excellence. And then look at what's in front of you, what you're doing, and start to look at how what you're doing can contribute to this excellence that you're looking for. By the way, this excellence you're looking for, in the Catholic world, we call that holiness. Think of whole, fully you is holiness. And so how is what you're doing, and how can what you're doing, if this is not an evil product that you're creating, then how can what you're specifically doing in this job contribute to your holiness, to your excellence, right? To make your talents shine and make you have better skills to create value for others. When you start to do that, you're actually feeding your excellence I guarantee you that itself makes you happier. So there's not just an end result of this. There is the result of once you understand what makes you more excellent, more complete, more holy, that is in itself, then work makes you happier. And I think that's one of the ways, 2/3 of our workforce is disengaged, doesn't like the job, just wants to go home in the evening. And I think this is the method against it. And Tom, if you allow me, I'd love to do a plug.
Yes, please do.
I did an 8-part video series called The Gospel of Work that I just released last year. It's free and it's at siocacenter.com. Maybe we can put this in the show notes.
Yep, show notes. Yep.
And so it's at Ciocca, CIOCCA center.com. And you can watch there the 8, you have to register, but it doesn't cost anything. It's an 8-part series. And all of this stuff that I'm just talking about is in there with the objective to help people to find deeper, greater meaning in everyday work.
Wow. And that would be perfect even for a business leader or people who work in business for a retreat, for a workshop, for kind of help reflecting on their work as a vocation. Yeah. That I've watched quite a number of them, and we used them in my last year at seminary classes there. So they're very rich, I can say. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all that you've done for today, sharing this in your work, though, for the church and her mission. I mean, St. John Paul II, his impact on you obviously reverberates into so much of your life and your work and to so many of the people's work. So thank you so much for sharing that today with us, Professor Widmer.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. I'm
God bless you.
Pleased to be here. God bless.
God bless you too. And is there any other website or something where people can find more on your writing or your work?
I have a website, andreas-widmer.com. And then, of course, at the Catholic University of America, I'm very easy to find, Widmer, Widmer. And I look forward to hearing from people.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great blessing to be with you. May the Lord bless you and your family and your work.
Thank you.
This has been another edition of Sharing the Faith with Dr. Tom Neal. This is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us again in 2 weeks for another show, and God bless you in the meantime.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.